So for those that are just coming back, who don't have kids that are still coming back from summer holidays, just in case you missed it, the location of X-Weddings changed, didn't it, Kev?
It did, yeah. So we are now at...
Normally we do something funny at the start, but I thought we'd do something serious.
So it's simple. We've just moved to the Apex Hotel in Bath, which is a nicer hotel, bigger hotel. It's got a swimming pool.
It's got saunas and jacuzzis. And,
yep.
Yeah. You suggested you might just stay in there for the...
Yeah, I'm not going to go to the conference.
For the duration.
I'm going to go in the
Tickets selling well?
Yes, tickets doing all right. We've still got a couple more to go.
I know I need to sell a few more of my workshop ones about adding sound.
Yeah, there's a couple of places left on yours for your sound one. There's a couple of places left on Voita's. And there's a couple more left on the keynote day also. But it's going well. I'm really looking forward to it. We've got Fujifilm coming and...
Oh, Fujifilm definitely coming.
Yeah, and also...
Oh, there's an opportunity also to just test some cameras, weren't there?
Yeah, and I think, fingers crossed, don't quote me on this just yet, but I think Andreas, bless him, is trying to organise is to have a hire system in place. So hopefully you'll be able to hire something on the day and just pay the postage costs or something like that, I think, from hire a camera and use it for however long period of time it is, and then bring it back or send it back. So yeah, that'd be pretty good. We also have tomorrow, we will be in Brighton for the Brighton meetup.
If you're listening to this on the correct day, it's tomorrow, so it's Tuesday the 10th.
Yeah.
If you're listening afterwards, you may have missed it.
You're so much better at remembering to like... I'm just thinking... I find it hard enough thinking about tomorrow actually isn't really tomorrow in my world right now.
Old habits die hard from the radio days of always having to think, what day is this going out?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So even...
It's songs of praise at Christmas.
Even though...
Being recorded in August.
Even though we actively encourage people of any camera affiliation to come along. You do not need to be a Fujifilm shooter. I'm hoping that we will have somebody from Fujifilm there tomorrow, maybe with a little bit of gear as well to test out if you so wish.
I've got a tiny announcement, but we should press the theme tune first.
The FujiCast.
So the little announcement to go with that, by the way, is that, and he said it's fine to mention it, is that a friend of the show, Sean Tucker, says he's going to be there as well. So he's becoming quite a large YouTube star, certainly in the UK. Very, very genuine, down-to-earth bloke, and be absolutely lovely to have him there. And you reminded me because when you said any camera affiliation, he shot Fuji, but he's not Fuji now.
I think he shoots Sony,
doesn't he? Sony now,
yeah. No, absolutely, quite right. It's about the photography and the chit-chat and the fish and chips and the beer and the curry and all that.
So will your gout be able to deal with the beer and the fish and chips and the red wine?
Well, between now and then I've got to get to South of Ireland, photograph a wedding on Saturday, and gout is not a good thing to have. Old man's disease. Old man's disease. Never get old, children. Never get old.
Never get old. Right, welcome to the FujiCast this week. Thank you to our friends at Simpler Straps for letting us give away a Simpler camera strap each to our favourite email questions of the week. Great thing about Simpler is that they're proportional, made for smaller pro-grade cameras, max function, minimal bulk. Great if you have gout as well, probably. That sort of minimal bulk equipment.
Yeah.
Quick adjusting non-metal hardware that won't scratch your camera. We have a great guest on the show today, Ian MacDonald. Now, you know Ian, don't you?
I've never met him, but I know him online and from the Fuji X community, of course. Yeah. So, nice guy, Canadian guy.
Yeah. Is he ex-wedding photographer? He is.
I don't...
Yes, he is. Of course he is. I know that.
He's an ex-photographer, yeah, but he does not necessarily shoot that many weddings.
Well, one of the most interesting things about Ian, and I had this in an email, was the fact that he was a former paramedic, and from his years working as a paramedic, he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And the photography helped him. Well, we talk about this, that it's not so much a cure, but it certainly helped him work through this process. And now he talks to photographers, camera clubs, and the corporate world about photography and what a difference that made to his PTSD. So he's a really, I'm so pleased that we managed to grab him for a conversation. And you will hear that on today's show. Right, questions. Let's leap into them. Do you have a first one?
No. No, not really.
Shall I go? Philip Kelly. Oh, I think we've dealt with this sort of one before, but it's worth mentioning. I just wanted to say thanks to you both for the wonderful podcast. I love listening to a variety of podcasts, but yours has quickly become one of my faves. If Kevin only smiles 35 times a month, then he must use up his quota very quickly as he makes each of these with you, Neil. Well, he does smile quite a lot, to be fair, Philip Kelly. Yes, he does.
That's gout pain.
Is that gout pain?
Yeah, it just makes me
It's
wince.
a bit like when you have a child and you can't work out whether they're smiling or they've just passed wind. I had several full belly of laughs during today's chat with Ralu. Top stuff, Kevin. Oh, this goes back for a while, doesn't it? Top stuff. Yeah. Kevin helped me make the right choice about the X100s a few years back after I emailed him, and thanks for replying to the message I left about the last YouTube video. So there we go. So actually, there wasn't so much a question, but it was just something that Philip Kelly wanted to pass on.
Yeah,
I'll put that in the passing on file.
Yeah,
and you can actually go with a question.
Okay, thanks, Philip, for that. This one is from Ryan Katsanes. You think that's how you pronounce it? Katsanes. Yeah, Katsanes.
I don't know, but if you say it with enough
Katsanes.
belief,
yeah,
Katsanes, then people think, yeah, that must be Katsanes.
Yeah, and it also says he's in Vancouver, Washington, which always confuses me.
Yeah,
it's Vancouver. Vancouver's Canada, right?
I thought, yeah,
and Washington is.
Well, there must be another Vancouver. I mean, there's
must be maybe a little bit of.
For example, in this country, there's a small London and a big London.
But yeah, I guess. Katsanes. Anyway, he's actually he's told us. Yeah, he's told us that there.
Yeah, it's there.
Katsanes.
Yeah, Katsanes.
Okay, so we'll get there eventually. Greetings, gents. Questions for Kevin primarily this time. How did you get started doing day in the life sessions? What are your top tips for finding clientele who want this kind of session? My thought is to build a portfolio with friends, so I have something to show. Thanks very much. Keep up the good work. How I got started, I had my own children. Essentially, they were my models. That got me going, concentrated on them, and it's just kind of come from there. And the best place that my day in the life stuff comes from, and honestly, openly admit that I don't do that many of them these days, is mostly because I'm kind of busy doing other stuff, but is from past wedding clients. You around about 18 months after the wedding, send them a follow-up email, just say, hey, hope you're all getting on, by the way, I don't know if you know, but I do these other sessions, just kind of general follow-up stuff. I do that regularly. I will send a set of emails to past clients that I think are worth targeting.
Post-gig upsell.
Yeah, but it's not so much about wedding stuff or albums or anything like that. It's like, hey, did you know that I can also do like commercial videos for your business and stuff like that? I started doing that recently. So because a lot of the clients, the brides and grooms, run their own businesses, or they're often high up in business or something, and you just kind of, it's who you know, and is not necessarily as important as what you know, but sometimes it helps.
How important has the upsell become for you now? Because for me, it's now becoming a really important part of my business, and I'll be absolutely honest, and we'll discuss this because it's one of the main topics, which was inspired by an email by a message from Rivki Lockyer in the Facebook group about being in the industry full time. Personally, I've found I've had to lower some of my prices of late, particularly in weddings. And so the upsell now has become even more important.
Yeah, I mean, weddings, yeah, absolutely. It's a tricky time for sure. And this Brexit.
Well,
Brexit's not helping. Honestly,
careful.
I watched that last night, that complete in the House of Commons, and I was embarrassed, absolutely embarrassed to be British. I can't even describe how angry I am at that whole thing. Whether not about who voted for what or in and out, it's this whole charade. The whole, it's like watching the Muppets. It's like watching the Muppets.
Waldorf and Statler.
And I just, those two, they're the ones up in the balcony, aren't they?
Yeah, they're the ones.
And
we loved it. We hated it. Those ones.
And the way that they shout at each other, and the way that they, lounge on the sofas, and
Well, do you know what? I watched Jacob Rees-Mogg actually reclining yesterday.
Order!
As if he was watching Sky Sports.
Honestly, we must not get political, but the arrogance of that, and in fairness, there will probably be people doing exactly the same on the opposite side of the house. But the total and utter humiliation of our country by 300 or so entitled people. Anyway, I need to get back in my box. It's crazy. What was the question again?
I tell you what, let off some steam, Kev. Hold on. And here's 5 seconds of cute kitten pictures for you, just to calm you down. Just by the way, if you don't live in the UK, many people in the UK are like coiled springs. They really are. They're just there. They're waiting. But while we talk about Brexit, I mean, there are quite a few people that I've spoken to in the Facebook group of late. From America and Canada, where similar things. It's a state of the industry thing at the moment. And I think it's very easy just to blame everything on Brexit.
No, absolutely. No, and that's what I was going to say. The marketplace is being tainted a little bit, and again, we're going off tangent a little bit. It's partly.
When have we ever gone off tangent?
It's partly the camera company's faults. I really believe this, that cameras are too cheap, too good. And it's too easy to basically rock up, take 20,000 pictures. The XT3, if you have it in sport finder mode, can take 30 frames per second, and you can be very good very quickly. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Okay, obviously the camera companies want that, but it's making the barriers less. Yeah, simple as that, and that's a fact.
So to get back on track then, upselling.
Oh yeah, upselling. So the answer is I've also reduced my rate slightly to try and kind of push things forward a bit. But a little thing I picked up from you really was about the time, because I've always been pretty precious about my the junction timing type thing. So bridal prep to first dance, for example. And I always say to them, look, I'll be there till first dance. I'll hang around 20 minutes or so after if people come on the dance floor, and I take some shots of that. But one of the things I've started doing is offering at the point of inquiry is an evening package. So, I think till 11 o'clock or something. And it's interesting that, 2 or 3 people have gone for it.
Is okay, isn't it?
They've gone for it. So
I wish I'd have done this in the good old days.
Yeah, but the good thing is, we're not staying there for free. That's important. I know a lot of people, and again, it's entirely up to them. Their marketing and branding is that we'll be there at 9 a.m. and we'll be there till the last person leaves the dance floor at 1 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't fill me with any kind of sense of anticipation. I don't mind being there until 1 o'clock in the morning, as long as I'm being paid my hourly rate for it.
One of the things I'm going to talk about in certainly in Bath at the X Weddings conference is the photo film and how much of a difference now that's made to my business. I introduced the photo film in the year we had the last big recession, and I wouldn't say it rescued or saved my business or anything quite like that. It was doing fine, but it made a lot of difference, certainly with upselling and the fact that people were then getting something that other photographers couldn't do. So the idea of, I can get sound and stills, really? And what does that become? It becomes like a supercharged stills slideshow. But the difference is you're going to have the sounds of those that you love forever, as well as the pictures, and that made a huge difference, and it's making a difference now again.
And quite right, because what you did then, we always talk about the immutable laws of marketing and branding, and it's better to be first than it is to be better. But in this case, you were first and better, which is great, because it's a win-win situation. Immediately after you started doing that, loads of other people started doing it, which is fine, of course. I mean, you even did workshops on it.
I was doing workshops, so you can't expect people not to.
But then there was that one guy, I can't remember his name, who then said that he was the first one to invent it or something, and I was like, get off your your bucket.
He doesn't do them anymore, by the way.
No, of course, because he didn't do them very well. That's why, and he couldn't sell any, and that's the difference. Make something that's unique selling point in photography. My God, who would have thought of it? And then and do it very well and be reasonable with it, which is what you did. And I even dabbled with it, but I was rubbish.
Your photo films have become something very different. It's interesting because you have a very good profile. I noticed a few questions come in for you that you often get associated with the inventor of the photo film.
Well, I'm not sure about the inventor, but I do title them photo films on mine, but they're not. They're just stills.
Essentially
with music. It's a slideshow.
But you call it, they are films of photos. You can still call them. You can do what you like, can't you?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, I dropped the ball then for a couple of years, and I took my eye off the game when it came to using the photo films as something that was really important. And I've had to really work hard to reintroduce the concept again, and that's making a difference again, albeit slightly at the moment, but it's making a difference.
I have to say, and I'm not at all associated with them or anything, but the Pixeloo Smart Slides thing that I started using recently has saved a lot of time.
Yeah.
I used to do exactly the same thing in Premiere Pro. But it saves so much time.
Well, the way you do them, it makes total sense, doesn't it?
It saves so much time.
Right, Paul Gallagher in York. Hi, Neil. Hi, Kevin. A three-parter. First of all, I'd like to say how much I'm loving the podcast. Blah, 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 blah. Best photography podcast, yada, yada, yada. He wrote this. Secondly, what's the best way for a complete beginner to learn the basics of photography, such as the exposure triangle, at the same time as learning the basics of their new Fujifilm camera? Someone I know has bought an X-T3 in the 1855, but doesn't really know how to use it. They live in completely different continent to me, so it's not as if I can give them a few pointers. I suggested they read Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson, since that's what really helped me, although quite a few years ago. They don't seem to want to go down the book route. What's a decent online course? Are there any that also incorporate teaching the basics with the use of the Fujifilm system? Finally, part 3, can I have a simpler strap? Yes, you can, Paul. There we go.
Well done, Paul.
You asked, you got.
I think that's Paul. I'm fairly sure that's Paul who came on my Scotland workshop.
Oh, is it?
If so, hello, Paul. If not, sorry.
There must be more than one Paul Gallagher in the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Although I was sure he's from York. Well, do you want to answer?
The book route is... I'm terrible at reading books.
Technical books,
yeah. The first thing that goes on the side... or back in the box, actually, neatly packed away for when I sell the camera in years to come, is the instruction manual.
Oh, there you go, straight in the bin for me. I don't keep the boxes or stuff like that.
So I tend to, anything I want to learn about photography systems, I tend to go through YouTube. It's just such a valuable learning resource. Now, I know you have to sort the wheat for the chaff. Is that the right expression?
Yeah.
But actually, it's not that hard to drill down after a very short amount of time.
No.
Some good, knowledgeable stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's where I would point him. Simple as.
You can usually see by the subscriber count and stuff if it's decent. Well, I would point him to my book, X100S, From Snapshots to Great Shots.
And of course, I've read that book,
which has a whole section.
It's still behind you, actually.
Which has a whole section on the exposure triangle.
I completely forgot your book. Sorry. First thing I would do before YouTube is I would go to this book written by a guy called Kevin Mullins. He wrote it about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still have it. It's behind. Yeah. I've still got it.
Well, I think I gave you a dedication in it, I think. Anyway, no, I wouldn't seriously buy that book just for that. Although you can if you wish.
It's on Amazon.
YouTube or lynda.com actually is really good.
Yeah.
But really, when you started photography, did you think about the exposure triangle?
No,
I didn't either.
No.
I didn't. I picked it up.
Yeah, I picked it up, and I heard about it in a college course I was doing.
Not
really. I can't remember ever really being.
Well, I remember having my very first camera, which was a Canon D30D or D30 or D something or other, whatever. Real prosumer, not prosumer, consumer DSLR.
Yeah, I think mine was Nikon D100.
Yeah, 300 quid or something it was. And I remember fiddling about with all the buttons and dials and everything, and slowly realising that actually when you change one thing, something else, it got darker or lighter, and you could counteract that with something else. And eventually experience kind of, got through that. That's how I learned. And just doing it, using it. There's only 3 parameters really to understand, and they're very once you kind of get over the hump of it, it's pretty simple. And obviously buy my book.
But obviously that's on Amazon. Have we checked? Is it still on Amazon?
Should be. You can buy it direct from my workshop's website. You get it signed.
Oh, there we go. Even better. Even better. Have you still got a few boxes in?
It's still in print. I got about 6 left, I think.
You?
Yeah, the royalties are still trickling in.
Get in quick.
Which is great.
6 left.
Yeah.
Your question. And then I think we'll go over the interview.
My question here is from Mark Adams, and it says, since swapping to Fujifilm X-T20 from Nikon, I found myself using JPEGs much more than ever before for my work. When I do edit, it's usually to add a LUT or of Eterna from the Fujifilm themselves, or perhaps some classic film LUTs. So LUTs are lookup tables. Yeah, like almost like presets. I never use presets in my software. Okay. Not almost like presets, as I think the LUT gives you much more control of the look you want. My question is, do you prefer presets or LUTs, and why? Loving your podcast and interaction on the Facebook group, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so he makes a valid point. I said almost like presets because I hadn't read the entire question, and they are different.
He's terrible, Mark. He really is. He likes this sort of paperless system, but.
Yeah,
I'm telling you. When I sent him the questions, it was like homework before.
Save the trees.
I know.
No, well, I mean, LUTs traditionally was something that we would use in video editing.
Yeah, I use LUTs in video editing.
Yeah, and you can use LUT. So a LUT is essentially a lookup table of color grading, effectively, right? And you can install LUTs on most photo editing packages, some easier than others. So on Lightroom, for example, you can use them, but it's you've got to jump through lots of hoops to do it.
And I can't see the reason for doing that when there's so many great presets around.
Well,
although if you find a LUT you like, obviously you want to use it as a preset.
Well, he says there he's using the Eterna LUT from Fujifilm on the X-T20. Now, X-T20 doesn't have Eterna in it,
of course,
you see.
Yes.
So this is one of the only ways you can get Eterna. So if you're using, I don't know, X100F or something like that, you can use the Eterna Fujifilm LUT to get an Eterna film simulation. However, it is a bit of a wacky way of doing it. Alien Skin Exposure and I believe Luminar and I believe Capture One also, you just import LUTs as if they were presets and you can then just apply them. So there are I don't use LUTs for stills. I use them for video editing a lot. I use presets for.
Are you using LUTs still for video editing? I've started laying off LUTs a bit now because I did buy. I mean, the Pete McKinnon ones are really good. I quite like some of. He has one called Kodak something.
Yeah.
Kodak Cruncher or something to do with Kodak, which I liked.
Yeah.
And it worked really nicely for a film I recorded abroad. But I'm now just going more gentle with my.
Yeah,
I tend to be recording in Eterna and then. And then grading atop that.
Saying that, I haven't done anything for YouTube for what feels like decades. But yeah, I still use them, and mostly because whenever I review the footage, I feel like I look like a complete bag of nails.
Oh, stop it.
So I have a LUT called Bag of Nails Remover.
Bag of Nails Remover, that's it. Soften.
Yeah. Soften.
Yeah.
Smile, lad.
I tell you what, if you really do need a good face softener, not that I've used it, there is one in Magic Bullet Looks. But obviously I've not used it. I just thought
I have that also, and I tried applying it once to a music video I'd recorded of some friends, and it was just taking hours and hours and hours to render.
Yeah.
Very slow.
Oh, they are, yeah. They can be.
But yeah, I agree. The Magic Bullet stuff is good.
Right, let's move to this week's interview. This week we hear from Ian MacDonald's website, ianmacdonaldphotography.com, who is one of Canada's official Fujifilm X photographers. He's also an educator, as you're about to find out. And actually, his bio makes for the introduction very well today. I quote, "It took me a long time to write this part of my website. The reality is that I, like many artists, struggle to talk about myself. As a photographer, I would rather put the spotlight on the subject of my photograph than on myself. After all, that's what really matters. Like many artists, I've been on a journey over the last few years that's ever evolving, but one that I can confidently say has given me more joy and purpose in my life than anything else other than my family and friends." Now, I think that's an interesting one because As you're about to find out, there are multiple levels to Ian's journey, one of them being his work as an educator in the field of PTSD, and perhaps more pertinently, how he believes photography aided his recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder. We've used the J word twice, so forgive me a third usage. I think this particular interview today is a journey in itself. I'd like to start, Ian, with some Fujifilm questions. Instead of rounding off with them as I usually do, I'm going to start with them. When did your Fujifilm, I'm going to call it epiphany, when did your Fujifilm epiphany start? What was that thing that convinced Ian MacDonald of the value of that above an SLR or DSLR?
Well, I've been an official Fuji X photographer for 3 years. But what really got me started, I was a portrait photographer. I was a Nikon shooter, and I was getting kind of sick of the gear that I was using, as many of us did when we made the transition to mirrorless. I started looking for something different, and because I was a portrait photographer, I was following people like David Hobby from Strobist and Zach Arias, and they had all made the switch to Fujifilm very early, the X100, the X100S, the X Pro 1. And so I started following the work that they were doing with it and made my switch shortly after that.
And what was that first camera?
The X100 and then the X100S.
Okay.
My first foray into the interchangeable lens Fujifilm cameras was the XT1.
But at some point, you because that's very similar to Kevin, and similar in some respects to myself, because I had the original X100, although Kevin adopted it far earlier than I did, obviously. But at some stage, you had to say, okay, all right, well, let's dump the Nikons and we'll go with the Fujifilms. And what was that moment and why?
It was very quick for me. There was actually, it's funny you mentioned Kevin. Fujifilm in Tokyo put out 4 videos around that time, and they had official X photographers talking about their journey. Kevin was one, Bert was another, and then Zach and David were the other 2. And those videos were really catalysts for me because I saw these professionals in different genres working with these cameras successfully. And I saw that. I very quickly said, yep, that's the road. That's the path that I want to follow. And I made my switch. So I think I was probably only shooting 2 systems for maybe 6 months, maybe a year max.
What's the glass camera combo that you can't be without now, though?
Well, the only camera I can't be without is an X100.
Right.
I've been with that camera almost since the beginning. I was one of the beta testers along with Kevin and Patrick and several people for the X100F.
Yeah.
Really, as many of us say, the X100 is our desert island camera.
Yeah.
Professionally, however, right now I'm shooting, for example, weddings with 2 XT3s just because I need a 23 millimeter field of view and a 56 millimeter field of view. However, if the X Pro 3 ever materializes, I will absolutely switch my XT3s over because I much prefer the ergonomics of those cameras.
Now that's interesting because this chat about this hopeful new X Pro coming along, I feel the same way, to be honest, Ian, because I think even that I'm in the same position as you, and the same lens combo as well for when I work professionally with my XT3s, the 23, 1.4. Is it the 1.4 you use?
I do, yep.
Okay, and the 56. And those I find pretty much stay on the camera until the dancing when a wide comes out. That's about it, to be honest. But I never enjoy it as much as I did the X Pro 2s.
Yeah, there's an expression called process versus product. And for me, the act of making a photograph is just as important as the final image, which I know, if we're only talking about client work is maybe a sacrilegious thing to say, but I need to love the process. And the X Pro series and the X100 series, they have a certain feel to them in your hand ergonomically and when you shoot them. The X-T3s are wonderful cameras, and I switched to them specifically because of what they brought to the table from a technology perspective. But like I say, when I can go back to those rangefinder style bodies, I will in a heartbeat.
You'll be a happy man. The X, I assume though, the X100F is the camera you travel with for the travel work that I've seen on your site.
Everything.
Your journey with the brand in Canada, not knowing how the ambassador system works where you are, how did that come about though?
One of the most common questions that all of us get is basically, how do I become, or how did you become an ex-photographer?
I know.
And Kevin actually has a really lengthy post on his website about it, which I just linked to mine because, he did the heavy work.
And I'd just like to say on that note, Ian, for the FujiCast, those questions that come in, generally we don't use those ones anymore.
Right. And the thing is that I don't know how I became an ex-photographer. Fujifilm reached out to me, as they did to all of us, that they asked to kind of be part of the family. And so I was doing what I think I've always done. I was creating work that I love. I was writing about it. I love writing as much as I love making images. So I don't know what a roadmap would be. I think they just look for people that they feel would represent the brand. And I'm sure the genre you shoot and everything else comes into play too. If your goal is recognition, you're always setting yourself up for failure because it's not sustainable. I mean, we can see what Instagram is doing to people's mental health that are obsessed when there's an outage for 24 hours or they didn't get enough likes on a photograph. And then the second part of it is that it's not sustainable. You fall into that publish or perish thing, and you're always feeding the machine that is recognition. But I think if you just do what brings you joy, what intrinsically fulfills you, brands that are like-minded will find you. And if you work well together, a relationship is born from that. And it's nothing that you have to force yourself to sustain because it's what you would do even if that brand didn't find you.
And the mental health thing, we're just about to come on to the PTSD subject. Am I right in saying that Canada are one of the early adopters of the system with Instagram of not having likes showing?
We were one of the places that Instagram piloted it. Now, that never happened to my account. So I'm sure they just randomized a small number of accounts to see what the effect would be. I would love it if they hid likes and things like that. And Instagram just made a return to what it was supposed to be, which was a photo sharing. Yeah. I mean, Instagram, Flickr, all of these things were really just supposed to be celebrations of this wonderful art form.
Absolutely.
And people have turned them into a much different thing. So Canada was one of the beta testers for that, but I have no idea what happened or what the results were.
So you've just finished your first book describing the relationship between PTSD and your photography. That in itself piqued my interest, Ian, to such a level that I felt we had to talk with you, regardless of your stature or your position or what you do as a Fujifilm ambassador in Canada. I think this would have been a fascinating subject, whether you're a Nikon shooter, Canon, whatever. Or even a pinhole camera shooter, I don't know. Describe this relationship, as you call it, for me. I know it has a lot to do with your former life as a paramedic, but let's start with that relationship.
I think, I have to go back and shed some background, I think, to talk about that. But in short, I was a paramedic for 20 years, and I've always been an artist at the same time. A musician, I did web design for a long time, and then I got into the visual arts and writing. And so a few years ago, what turned out to be PTSD came to a head. And as you can imagine, it disrupted my life completely, my family's life, my health, my wellness. And so, of course, you go through all the things you would think a paramedic goes through when they're trying to heal from PTSD. They take time away from work, they go through counseling and everything else. But for me, I was very lucky that I also had photography and music, for that matter, because the arts, they gave me something joyful in my life. They gave me something productive in my life to focus on at a time when, honestly, just getting out of bed was a struggle. And having a camera was one of the few times that the demons weren't knocking at the door, to be, I guess, sadly dramatic about it for a second.
No, that makes sense.
If you think about mindfulness practice and you think about when are you not thinking about the bills and when are you not thinking about income tax, and for you, when are you not thinking about Brexit? The camera was that time for me. When I was out making pictures, I wasn't sick. I wasn't thinking about being sick. I wasn't thinking about my future or my family's future. I was thinking about making photographs. And so it became a huge part of my recovery.
Paramedics have one of the highest rates of mental health problems, don't they?
And suicide, yeah. If we were to go chronologically, there were little signs for years building up. 20 years as a paramedic, 15,000 ambulance responses.
Wow.
There were a lot of things that we know now PTSD is not necessarily just one specific event. It can be, but much more it is a cumulative effect. And you see that with a lot of soldiers and people that worked in my industry. And so if we look back in hindsight, we can see years of building up of me becoming angry and frustrated and intolerant all the time. And no one pinned it to, oh, Ian has PTSD.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people just thought, if I can say this on your podcast, Ian was an asshole, right?
We've had worse.
But the reality is those were the signs of cracks appearing in the dam. And then what happened is that it came to a head. It broke into panic attacks. It broke into insomnia. It broke into nightmares. And that's when I started seeing a counselor.
And the moment that camera came out, did you know that there was a relationship forming that was rather unique?
Yeah, I did. I can think of times where I would force myself to drive into the city to shoot street, for example.
Yeah.
And at the time, I would be incredibly anxious, nervous of driving into the city. And that in itself was a very weird thing for me because I've always been the classic type A personality, which I think most people that worked in my industry are. I thought nothing of managing a scene with, multiple gunshot patients. I was a musician that performed on stage in front of hundreds, if not 1,000 people for one show that I played. And so being anxious or nervous about just driving into Vancouver to take a few pictures for an hour was a very weird ego destroying experience.
Very strange, I would have thought.
Right. But what was interesting was that I would park the car, I would walk out into the streets, I would sling my X100 over my shoulder, I would put podcasts on, and I would start walking. And it would be hours into it that I would realize I feel good. There wasn't all those voices. All those voices weren't in my head talking about, is my health okay? What's wrong with me? All those things that at the time were going through my brain. It was just pictures. It was just the act of taking pictures. And then that became a formal part of my recovery, if you were. I purposely made myself go out and take photographs because I realized the huge benefits it had to my mental wellness.
Has the action of making pictures and the street work that you were involved in, has that, I'm trying not to use a clumsy expression here, but has that cured or has it managed PTSD?
It's an interesting saying, or interesting question, I should say. I don't know if cured is the right word, but one of the things that happens when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, or if you have panic attacks or anxiety or depression, I mean, these are things that not just paramedics live with. These are things that everybody, to a degree, probably is struggling a little bit with something that they may not even realize. What I realize, though, is that a lot of those things come from what they call cognitive distortions. Basically, you have incorrect thought patterns and it triggers emotional responses. What photography did was give me a safe place where I realized, no, everything's fine. And the more I realized everything was fine when I was out taking photographs, that started spilling into all the other aspects of my life. Everything was fine at the dinner table. Everything was fine when I was walking the dog. And so I think photography lit a spark that filtered into all the other aspects of my life, if that makes sense.
It does. Since PTSD has become something people feel less inclined to disregard or brush under the carpet, because there was a stage clearly where people did, there is this acceptance of it and of the condition. You now have a 90-minute presentation on it, which I was reading about. Who do you talk to with? Can you take that into boardrooms, or is it camera associations? Photographic association. Who do you take it to?
Yeah, at first it started out specifically that I have a really active schedule speaking here in Vancouver. I probably speak to 12 or 15 camera clubs in the Lower Mainland each year. I speak at photo conferences here. Sometimes Fujifilm will ask me to speak on their behalf somewhere, trade shows and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I already had a really active thing. And I have presentations on travel photography, street photography. I've got several kind of canned 2-hour presentations that groups can pick off my website and I come in and deliver. But this one group that I've spoken to many, many times, they're wonderful people and very kind and supportive of me. They basically said, we've run out of things for you to come talk about, make something new. and so I had to stop and think about, like, really, I'm a lifelong educator. I've been teaching for 25 years and what could I do that wasn't, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, formal education? And that really got me thinking about this journey that I was on. And so I looked at putting together a presentation that was about my process, not just through PTSD and how photography healed me, but the reality is, and this is what the book is about, my photography changed during the time I was healing from PTSD.
Interesting.
And so I first put the presentation together for them. They became sort of the petri dish for me to test it out. And then it's gained traction. And so now I'm making slight changes to it, so it's not as photographic centric, because there's value in talking to friends of mine that work for, employers of paramedics and people in industries outside of the photography and the arts community.
Let's move on to your wedding work. It's documentary in tone. Has it always been that way since you started shooting them, or did you, forgive the pun, Ian, did you develop into that style?
Oh, you've been saving that one up, haven't you?
Yes, I apologize.
No, it was good. Weddings are a small part of my work. I probably only shoot about 6 weddings a year.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's not a huge part of my work. Education is actually the main focus of my photography
Photographic
business.
Education.
But the reason for that is a wedding to me is basically street photography with really well-dressed people. And I did make a conscious decision to only shoot weddings in that fashion. A big part of the switch that we talked about when I went from shooting, Nikon to Fuji, was that I had become frustrated with the confines of what I'll call structured photography. Portrait work in a studio with a creative team and lighting and hair and makeup artists. And even to an extent at the time to landscape photography, where I was restricted by the location and the weather and the time of day. I really moved into Fuji and street photography and everything else. At the same time, I said, I need to be shooting candidly, shooting sort of in the confines of all these, I'm going to use the word restrictions, but it's not the right word. Just wasn't for me anymore. And so that's actually where my brand shifted to focusing more on education and that kind of thing. And street photography clearly is my first love. You can see in my work.
I know. Yeah.
Having said that, the reason I only shoot maybe 6 weddings a year now is that I'm very honest with my clients when we do the consult. And we talk about, here's what I do. And they talk about, here's what we need. And if what the client needs is not what I provide, I'm more than happy to refer them to friends of mine that shoot in a little bit more of a traditional fashion. And so I just make sure the client's needs are served, and maybe I'm the right person. And, then it's a win, because documentary wedding photography is fabulous. And it's still a win, even though I don't book the gig, if they end up booking the photographer that delivers what they're hoping to get.
Well, there's an honesty and integrity to the way you work in that respect then, isn't there?
I think, this is a bit of a second calling for me, and I really just made the decision with my photography that I've done jobs that had aspects I didn't like. We all have. And for me, photography just had to be doing what I love. And it means I make less money. Absolutely, it means I make less money. But I love what I do, and I look forward to each day. So I'm okay with that trade-off.
I mean, talking a bit about health, I'm going to mention health, but in a slightly different context. And and on the podcast of late, we've been talking about the health of the photography industry and the challenging times that are facing many photographers, particularly here in the UK. And like it or loathe it, the suggestion of for the UK brethren who listen, you mentioned it first, so I'm afraid I'm going to mention it second. I think some of that fallout at the moment is down to this general malaise around the thing that shall not be named, Brexit. What's it like in a country where sanity seems to be prevailing?
Well, Canadians just kind of do their thing, right? I laughed, actually. I was in the States a little while ago, and somebody bumped into me, and I apologized. And they went, "You're Canadian, aren't you?" And I went, "Yeah, how did you know?" And she says, "Because I bumped into you and you still apologized," right? We just, we kind of do our things. The reality, though, is that businesses always change. and as a business owner, you have to roll with the punches. You can shout into the wind. But if I think of when I did web design in 2004, like around that time, web design back then, you didn't have a lot of big content management systems like WordPress. Web pages were handwritten, they were hand coded.
The days of Dreamweaver.
Those were the early days of Dreamweaver. And at the time, Dreamweaver produced horrible code. And so if you really wanted a professional website in the early 2000s, you would pay somebody a lot of money to make a custom page for you. That's actually how I got into professional photography. I was doing web design first, and my clients asked for portrait and product photography to go with the website I was building for them. That was actually my entrance into professional photography. But to go back to the original question, if I think of web design now, it is nothing like what it was back in the early 2000s. And so people in that industry have either had to evolve or they've had to move on. And I think the photography industry is doing that a little bit too. There's a lot of people coming in. Camera technology has made the barrier to entry a little bit more palatable. I think that more clients have expectations for video now, which they maybe didn't before. I think there's a changing industry. And along with the changing industry, if you want to have sustainability, you have to go with those changes and find your opportunities within the current state and not what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago.
I want to talk about street photography finally, because it's a really important part of your life. It's an important, I think it's still an emerging genre for many at the moment. But what is street photography to you? And I've asked this of a few guests, including Sean Tucker of late, because it differs so much to so many different people. There's a lot of purist nonsense spoken about it. So I'd be intrigued to know what it means to you and what it is.
So I am most definitely not a purist. We can definitely start with that. Eric Kim has a quote that says, street photography is finding beauty in the mundane. And I think that's everything to me. You may have experienced this, and your listeners may have experienced this. The people that travel, here's an example of that. People from North America that go to Europe, and you look at their itinerary and they book 5 countries in 10 days. And they spend 2 days in Rome and 2 days in Paris and 2 days in Berlin and 2 days in Prague and 2 days in Amsterdam. And the reality is you could spend a year in Paris and still not see all of Paris. And so when those people travel, a lot of times they'll see the Eiffel Tower, and then, they'll hop in an Uber or catch the metro to see the Louvre. And then they'll try to hit 5 or 6 sites in one day. But for me, the beauty of Paris is not the Louvre. It's not the Eiffel Tower. It's what you see on the streets when you walk between those landmarks. And that is street photography for me. I love taking pictures, beautiful cityscapes and landscapes. I love that. But to me, I much prefer seeing the shopkeeper, getting her shop ready in the morning. I much prefer to see the gentleman who's wearing, his suit and tie and hat walking his dog in the morning, or the people sitting on the patios drinking wine. To me, that's the beauty of a city. And that's where street photography really fulfills me. It's just capturing those daily snippets instead of rushing from one big thing to the next big thing.
How do you deal with what some people find is reasonably confrontational, which is when you're making pictures of people and they know you're making pictures of them? How do you deal with that?
I've had very little experience with that, actually. The thing for me is, if somebody says, hey, did you just take a photograph of me? My first answer is always yes. I never try to hide the fact that I'm making photos, and I say yes with a smile. And when people come over to me and say, do you mind me asking, why did you make that photograph? I will tell them the truth. I take photographs of people because I think there's something beautiful about them. It could be their hair, it could be the dress they're wearing, it could be their smile, it could be the wizened lines and wrinkles in their face. And I will tell them, I think you look amazing. Look at this photograph. Look at how wonderful you look in it. I think it's a compliment as a street photographer to make a photograph of somebody. And it's nothing that I would ever be guilty or ashamed of. And it's funny because the vast majority of people will say, wow, that's a fabulous photo. And then I use that opportunity to turn that into a little mini impromptu portrait session with them. And often I end up sending them copies of the photographs. Now, there have been 2 people maybe 3, but 2 that I can recall that have asked me to delete the photograph. And the thing is, I do. I'm not under any obligation to. I'm certainly not under any legal obligation to, but I do, because photography for me is art, and art is about enriching and bringing joy to our lives. And if somebody's not happy with a photograph, then I don't want that photograph out there.
Let's talk about the legality and the logistics, if you don't mind. The recent French workshop that you ran, I was looking at the images from that. And by the way, you write so beautifully as well when you write your pieces that go with
thank you.
your
That's
images.
kind.
I was thinking it must be a very difficult affair in the capital now, or indeed that country. But I was trying to make sense of the Article 9 French Civil Code about everyone having a right to privacy and not being able to make a picture of anything or anyone in France. But just like many things, there seem to be exceptions to the rule and get-out clauses that would make this question about 2,000 words long. How do you deal with the legality about street and the questions that are making it seemingly harder to make pictures where people feature?
Europe is tougher right now, isn't it? I mean, you've got the confusion over what the GDPR is and isn't. And then you've got things like what you just described. Is it Title 9, Article 9 in Paris?
Yeah, I think it's Article 9. It's a French civil code.
And it's a very old law, is my understanding, that's been around on the books for a long time. For me, I think a big part of it is, what am I doing with the images? I shoot street photography for me. I don't shoot street photography for commercial purposes. I don't shoot street photography to use these photos for stock or to sell them to an organization for their promotional materials. Street photography is a personal endeavor that I use to express myself as an artist. And so right now in Europe, I agree with you, the waters have been muddied a tiny little bit regarding the legalities of candid photography. The workshop and the 8-part series that's on my website right now that you just mentioned, it was not a street photography workshop per se. It was a travel workshop, but it definitely had street photography elements in it. And the thing for me is, if anybody contacted me again and said, that picture, I really don't want it on your website, I would take it down.
Yeah.
I think it's the respectful thing to do. But the funny thing is, I've had 99% of the people that I've ever spoken to have asked for copies of the photographs rather than, can you take that down? As a paramedic, every shift on an ambulance, 12-hour shifts with what was always overtime, so 14-hour shifts probably, you'd meet 10 new people a day. And you would have to learn how to build an instant rapport with those 10 people. And then multiply that by a 20-year career and 15,000 people. And what you really learn is 99% of the people out there are wonderful if you just give them the opportunity to be. And I think a lot of the times people that have problems on the street, it's not their photography skills, it's their people skills. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's not an insult at all. But I think sometimes we build up stories in our mind of things we need to be nervous about, and that instantly creates an uncomfortable situation. Whereas if you start from a place of, the vast majority of people the world over are wonderful people. And, if we just stop and talk and have a conversation and approach it more like a Humans of New York thing and less like an, oh no, I'm in trouble thing, you'll be surprised by the reactions you get from people. And that just feeds into all the other parts of it, like the legality issue and everything else.
I think that's a wonderful way to leave this, but I don't want to leave it just yet. I've got a question where I shall wear a cheeky glint in my eye.
All right, then.
What's next? I'd written what's next down a little while ago, but I'm going to say what's next with that cheeky glint in my eye, buying an X Pro 3, I assume.
So my answer to that part would be talk to Kevin. And then in terms of what's next for me, that's actually a really good question. I'm always trying to move the ball down the field a little bit. And I'm really happy with how my workshops are going. I'm enjoying the writing I'm doing. Things are great, honestly. But I always fear complacency. And so I've been thinking a lot about the what's next. I could probably keep doing what I'm doing right now for another 10 years. But for me, it's always looking for the next thing. So right now, I want to get this book out the door, because I really do think a book about how the arts can help you heal from things like PTSD, and not just PTSD. I mean, you can be a computer IT person or a construction worker or a doctor or an accountant and still suffer from anxiety and depression. But I really want to get this book out for a couple of things. The process of writing it has been very cathartic for myself, but I also think there's a lot of value in the way my story might be able to help people. And then after that, I'll kind of look at the next big thing.
Well, it's been an absolute genuine privilege talking with you, Ian. When the PTSD book and your relationship with it and the photography comes out, you must let us know, because I'm sure there'll be listeners right now that will be interested in reading that and having a copy of that for themselves.
I would be happy to. And at the risk of blowing a little bit of smoke your way, you and Kevin are doing a wonderful job on this podcast.
Well, that's very kind of you, and we appreciate that as well. Thank you for your time, Ian.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We've got some cracking guests coming up over the next month. Brian Caparici is going to be on in a few weeks' time. You know Brian, don't you? Yeah, because you've been interviewed on his podcast.
Yeah, I'd say I know him. I've obviously been interviewed and never met him. But yeah, he's a good business guru. I think he's the one that runs the Sprout Studio stuff.
That's right. The software.
Yeah, he was.
There's 9 people working for him in his company now.
Yeah, well, he was one of the guests on the little Meet the Listeners thing,
and that's where this comes from. I mentioned to Brian afterwards with your with your software company and the fact that you run the CRM system for photographers, then and with his knowledge and training photographers on the other side of the pond, I thought it'd be quite interesting. So we've got him. And also in a couple of weeks' time, it's a Meet the Moderators piece that we're doing with Peter and Steve. So if you're in the Facebook group and you've locked antlers with Peter and Steve, then you will hear them in a couple of weeks' time. Tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Monday, the 9th of September, then the 10th, tomorrow, if you're joining us in Brighton, we're doing a show which will be recorded live during the fish and chip session at midday, although you're meeting us at 11 o'clock at the entry to Brighton Pier, the Palace Pier, not the burned down one.
No.
Then obviously, and then that podcast that we're recording tomorrow is going to be played out next week, and there'll be a couple of special guests on that are turning up. So fantastic. So do come and join us. Right. Questions. Oh, before we go to questions, a hand up in the air. We should have noticed this. Do apologise. I must admit, it was a bit quiet on the questions last week, and the reason for that is because the email wasn't working.
Yeah, and that was well, I'm not going to take responsibility for it because it was my I'd changed the hosting of the websites and everything, and in amongst all of that mix, there was something that went awry. And so technically it was not my fault, but I'll take responsibility for it.
If you sent in a question, we don't mind if you send it again. Only if you sent it in the last week.
You would have got a bounced email. Yeah. So if you've got a returned email,
please send it again. Yeah, we'd appreciate that. Right, you can go with the questions first.
Okay, so this one's from Nigel Payton. He says, "Hi guys, just want to say first off, the podcasts are like a great Tarantino movie." Really? What's your favourite Tarantino movie?
Blimey, I mean, where do you start? Natural Born Killers, Pulp Fiction, clearly, Kill Bill. I love Kill Bill. I like the character, the nurse in it. California Mountain Snake, frightening.
I can't watch any of those films. No.
I love them.
I started listening to them again and again. There's so much content I missed the first time round. I'm actually looking forward to listening to a third time. Wow, brilliant.
You say it with such belief.
No. Anyway, my question is about timing before the wedding. I heard Mr. Mullins say he likes to get to a wedding 1.5 hours before.
Sometimes more. 1.5 hours.
Oh yeah, no. I start my coverage an hour and a half before, but I'm usually at a wedding like
3, 4, 5 hours
in
sometimes.
The vicinity.
If you're in London, you're literally there as the markets are opening.
I'm very conscious of that. That's my anxiety. Anyway, so when do you guys have time to shoot the bride? Also, how do you split your time between photographing the bride and the groom? Do you get times from them both beforehand, asking when the hair, makeup people will be arriving, etc.? I seem to remember at my wedding getting ready about the same time as the wifey. But to be honest, the day was just a blur, so I can't be sure.
Well, I personally, I concentrate on bridal preparations. Not that the boys are boring or anything like that, but it does tend to be shirts on, collars done, the cufflinks, and we're done. We stand around and And whereas there's so much more, it just seems to be going on with the girls. I'm not just talking about makeup and hair. It just seems to be a slightly more electric atmosphere.
I haven't done groom prep I think I've done it about 3 times in my entire time.
Well, I did my first only a couple of weekends ago at a military wedding. Now, that was a bit different because suddenly there's a whole different... I mean...
Buckles and belts.
Yeah, well, the groom had actually more changes than anybody else, it seemed. Or the best man. No, he had 3 changes because he had a Scots outfit in the evening as well. But yeah, generally speaking, though, it's there's not that much happening with the boys. No, generally.
I had,
and usually they don't want to be fussed.
Saturday's wedding just gone. A classic example. The bride and groom contacted me ages ago and said, "Well, we'd quite like to have groom prep done also." And I was like, okay, fine. Well, in which case we'll need to have a second shooter because I can only be in one place at one time. And which they agreed to, and they paid for a second shooter. And Alex came along, bless him, and I got a text message from the bride, around about an hour and a half before the wedding, saying, "Oh, the groom's running a bit late. He's not going to. He's gone to the pub, and so tell Alex to just kind of see us at the ceremony." So that often happens. I don't get involved with grooms really at all. And in terms of the timings and things like that, I've had it right at the beginning where I would get emails saying we're going to the hairdressers at 7:30 in the morning, meet us there. And I did it, and I learnt my lesson very easily there. So now when I get the email in my pre-wedding questionnaire, I'll ask them, what time are you, what time is bridal prep? And around that question, I'll explain to them that I spend 45 minutes with the bride, and I need to be at the ceremony location 45 minutes before it starts. So at that point, let's just say the ceremony is at 1 p.m. So I need to be at the ceremony location at 12:15. And I will then, assuming that the bride's getting ready at the same place, I will be with her at 11:30. So I kind of explain that to them, and at the same time, I'll say, you definitely don't want kind of little short, fat, hairy, stumpy me bumbling around your bedroom for 5 hours in the morning. You want to have time with your girls. That's the whole point of it. Yeah. And the brides generally...
Well, I can imagine that. Short, fat, hairy... which is not fair anyway. Just popping up behind the bed. Hello. Good morning.
Here I am.
I brought you some tea.
Yeah. No smiles, though. But it's true, you don't... We talked about this we touched on it briefly earlier, this whole kind of 9 a.m. through to midnight thing. Yeah. And, it's only me. I totally appreciate it's only me, but I cannot believe that me being at bridal prep for the whole duration of it, how many pictures do you give them for bridal prep? I don't know, 10? Yeah. Maybe.
Sometimes there's a few more.
Sometimes a few more, perhaps if there's other stuff going on. Yeah. But how, I'm guilty of this myself. I mean, she's having a lipstick done or makeup or hair or something, and you take loads of pictures of it, and assuming one of them, the next one will be better than the previous one, and then you give them one, and it's... You just overshoot, and I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but so I don't. It's an hour and a half, and that's my, that's in the contract as well. That's in my notes to them, so they're fully understanding of it. Groom prep don't bother. Ali Stewart in Dundee. This is going to make you feel a bit melancholic. I'm still loving the podcast, although Fat Kev's in Spain is making me very jealous. He isn't now. Fat Kev?
He's been.
Did you say Fat?
No,
Kev?
fact. The fact that Kev. No,
Fat Kev is in Spain. I've been called many things, and I have been called that.
No. Although the fact that Kevin is in Spain is making me very, very jealous, as the weather here has been terrible. But he's not now. You see, the fact is he's now back in the UK.
Yeah.
It's not rained so much as summer weddings for years. Anyway, my questions are: can I enter the competition to win a ticket for Bath? You are the last one to enter, Ali, because we are going to announce it this coming week in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
So if you want a ticket for Bath, you will find out if you're a winner in the Facebook group this coming week. If you have to explain or write a caption to describe an image, can it be good? Can it be a good documentary photograph, or should a documentary photograph be self-explanatory with no need for words? I quite like that question. So we'll deal with that one first, because she has another one coming up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because technically, when we're looking at a picture, that should explain, give us the story behind it, etc. But sometimes you need to know the context.
Yeah.
If it's a
Well, I think back now to Don McCullen exhibition.
Yeah.
We needed some of the stories,
Absolutely.
particularly that, and we've mentioned this one before, the horrific one where the guy's just about to be executed.
Yeah.
Then it kind of needed to know the backstory of what was going on there.
Yeah.
Which made the picture even more horrific.
Yeah.
But the backstory was important. I mean, the guy in the picture looked, scared, obviously, but knowing what was about to happen.
Yeah.
The caption assisted the history of that picture.
Yeah, I think there's a validity in that, definitely. And of course, if it's a picture of a bride and groom at the front of the aisle sharing their first kiss, then that goes without saying, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes you might need
unless
to
she's kissing the best man, and then you might need a bit of backstory. But also it depends on the audience, right? So there are many pictures that you will have on your own wedding blog, and Ali will also, and I will also, that make no sense to the casual visitor, but make a lot of sense to the clients. So something particularly might have happened, or there might be, it might even be just a vehicle passing by or something, anything that helps to make the client understand their story more doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make your casual visitor understand it more. Well, I think you make a very valid point, because I changed my website a good few years back now to have the backstory to images, some of the images on my portfolio. And I did that because I wanted to introduce myself to clients that were coming to my website. So now when you read down the main portfolio, it reads like, in some places there's a short commentary to the way I was feeling when I was making the picture.
I do exactly the same. My portfolio page, I hate portfolio pages.
But portfolio pages were never like that, were they?
No.
And most portfolio pages aren't. If you go to a portfolio page, and of course it depends as well whether whether the format of your site will allow some words. But if it does, if you can relay some context to a picture, I know that I've had clients that have said, "God, I felt like I knew you before I met you, because I've read your words, I've read your thoughts."
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I do Why I Love Your Wedding Picture series on my website. And totally, you do need to explain some stuff.
I wonder what Bruce Gilden would write if he was writing captions. Another angry man, another angry woman.
I see. He's doing a workshop in London in October.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I was tempted, I must admit, but I'm in Portugal. So question 2 of Ali.
Yes. Well, tell me why I should upgrade from the XT2 to 3, or should I wait for the upgrade of the X100F? It's upgrades, people, upgrades. Do you remember that from Robots?
No. Is that scary?
No, it's a cartoon.
Oh, I may have seen it.
There's a scary moment in it.
Oh no, I wouldn't have seen it then.
But really, it's made for 5 and 6 year olds.
So, tell me why I should upgrade from the XT2 to the XT3, or should I wait for the upgrade of the X100F? Well, firstly, Ali, what I would say to that is the X100 range is very different to the XT range. So upgrading from the XT2 to the X100 next, whatever that is, whenever that is a bit of an odd thing, really. I like the X100. Absolutely, I shoot with it all the time at weddings and stuff, but it's a side-by-side camera. It's not something that I would consider upgrading from my XT to my replacing my XT with my X100 or something. No. However, but the original part of that question, XT2 to XT3,
2 to 3, I'd definitely be thinking about it because of the low light performance, dynamic range,
in a heartbeat.
The filming opportunities and the different megabit rates that you get
in a heartbeat.
Don't even think about it.
I said when the XT3, when they first kind of started showing the XT3 stuff, the specs and everything, I knew then that was the biggest upgrade to a camera, the FujiFilm X camera in the whole history of it. Well,
the XT3 was I've used Fujifilm for a long time, as you know, but not exclusively. And the XT3 was the camera that saw me box up my Canons.
Yeah, the XT3 is the camera that I shoot along with an X Pro 2 at weddings now, and I'm always an X Pro 2 user, X Pro 1, X100F, etc. But the XT3, the functionality of it, I don't particularly give too much love to the design, but the actual functionality it's nuts. It's incredible. It's phenomenal.
I just when I was on holiday this summer, I took the X100F. I took nothing else, just the X100F. I even filmed on it as well. And that's a super camera.
X100F is beautiful. I took loads of pictures of the kids with it this summer as well. When
I get round to making the film, the one camera 1 week film.
One camera 1 week.
Yeah.
Nice title. Yeah.
Nice title. Not enough imagery yet because I did spend a little bit too long with the Sun Lounger. But there we go. Right, your question.
Have we been to Finland before?
Thomas.
Thomas.
Over the last couple of weeks, he popped up as a guest on the show.
Absolutely, yeah, quite right.
This is Johannes.
My bad. So this is Johannes Hanila. I love saying all these names. Do you remember the? I won't mention the name of the convention, but
the convention,
reading out of the awards.
Oh, and it was hysterical. I used to just collapse under the table at the mispronunciation of names. And actually, sometimes... sorry, we'll have to bleep that name out. Sometimes the person wouldn't even bother. They'd just say, I can't even bother with this name.
Epic. Anyway...
sorry, you had to be there, dear audience.
You did, yeah, sorry. Yeah. First of all, thank you for a very, really interesting and entertaining podcast. High quality. Thank you very much. I would like to know how you keep the passion for photography alive and keep improving as a photographer when it is your profession. I know that when a hobby becomes a profession, it may happen that at some point it becomes just another job and you find yourself stuck in a rut. I love that word, rut. Stuck in a rut. That may lead you to lose the passion that feeds your creativity and pushes you to learn. How do you keep the passion alive and challenge yourself as a photographer? Do you, for example, practice other genres of photography in your free time? Give yourself tasks or projects, or maybe switch to a less used focal length to push yourself out of the comfort zone. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Johannes Hanila from Tampere, Finland. I think there was a Winter World Cup there, you know.
What, in Finland?
Winter Olympics.
A Winter Olympics, maybe. Was there?
Yeah.
Johannes would be able to tell us.
Yeah, let us know, Johannes.
You know, when a hobby becomes a profession, it instantly changes it instantly changes the dynamic of it. Totally. I mean, I go back to my time working in broadcast and radio, and I mean the hours I would spend till midnight 30, 1 a.m. in the morning, just practicing at hospital radio stations, and then when it became my job, of course, that kind of passion wasn't there in the same. So I loved it, but it wasn't quite the same. There wasn't quite the same energy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is really, really, really important that you know, most people who get into photography, whether that's from school, university, or they just fall into it at some point later in life, do it because they love it. They love the art of it. And it's not a functional job in you know, it's not like being an accountant or something.
No.
So it is important to keep it, and I know many people who have lost it, and I know many people that, you know, basically pick up the cameras on a Saturday, shoot a wedding, put them down Saturday night, and pick them up again the following Saturday, and do nothing in between. And I think that's desperately sad, you know, personally for myself. I don't feel like I have ever lost the passion for wanting to take pictures. Many occasions I've lost the creative spark, and sometimes I've, you know, been sat there thinking, I really want to go out today, and then just haven't. And you know, you do need to give yourself ambition. You need to give yourself projects. For example, you know, you can do 365. Oh, well, Bert Stefani over in Belgium, he's one of the first things I ever remember from him was he did a thing called 50 and 50, which was 50 pictures in 50 days on a 50mm lens. And
what a great idea.
Yeah, and he's just started it again this week, I think. So he's up to like day 3. So I think it's like 10 years since he did it. So he's doing it like as an anniversary.
Don't start using 200mm lenses, you'll go mad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Keep it short.
But you know, something like that keeps you peaked. But also, you know, I'm always a little bit cautious of those kind of things, because by giving yourself those boundaries, by shackling yourself to the rule of 50 and 50, for example, although Bert will do it very well, it then may become a chore. Just by virtue and, you know, an inference of what you're trying to do. So, you know, don't make it a chore. Just enjoy it. Give yourself time. That's the critical thing. You know, time to do something. I one of the things when I was in Spain, I sat down and kind of reevaluated how I plan my diary and schedule and everything. And I've got that down to a T now. I've got a good diary set up. I use Remember the Milk to the app to tell me what I'm doing and when I'm doing. And
Remember the Milk.
Remember the Milk. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Is that an Android app?
Yeah, it's an everything app. It's really, really cool.
Remember the milk.
Maybe that's for another time to talk on the podcast about time management and stuff. Yeah. But what I am doing is building into my time to go to places and shoot. And mostly for me, it manifests itself as street photography. And I've got in my diary places I'm going to visit, and often it's back to London or whatever, and I'm going to make YouTube films and all that. But I have to diarize. I have to give myself time, and otherwise it becomes a chore. It becomes a rush, and then you just sit back in your studio and you think, oh, crap, I really wished I'd actually got off my butt to do something instead of actually doing anything else. So that's important. And I think that it's something you can't. This is one of those kind of questions where you just want to say you have to help yourself. You can't let it wash over you. Only you know what makes you passionate about something, whether that's picking up a book and going off and shooting something similar, or whether it's giving yourself a theme, giving yourself a parameterized theme, whatever, doesn't matter. I mean, look at Patrick Larocque. I mean, he takes pictures of his draining board and they're beautiful, and it's annoyingly
That's a genre.
so. Yeah, draining board pictures.
Yeah, draining board pictures.
But he just he's a mesmerizing guy, and he just sees things and light and shadow and just takes a picture of it, and it's incredible.
Johannes, you make a good point about other genres of photography in your free time as being something that could be an interesting thing to do as well. I think that's very, very important. I'm going to surprise you now, and it started a little bit with my conversation with Mandy Burton, which was a good month, maybe 2 months back now. But I've started photographing not dogs and their strangers, or dogs and their owners.
Dogs and their strangers.
Dogs and their strangers. What on earth am I talking about? Mandy, you would know what I'm talking about, wouldn't you? Yes, I would. Good. I've started doing some portraits because I love dogs, and we look after my brother-in-law's dog, and I started doing very, very conventional kind of portraits and a Louis Garvin kind of style.
Yeah.
So that surprised you.
Yeah,
you weren't expecting me to say that, but
No, I totally agree. I mean, they can be beautiful. Do you want our dogs? You can have our dogs. You can.
Well, you want
I don't want any money for them. You can just have them.
No, I don't want the dogs.
I'll even give you a child well if you want.
I'm making pictures. But thank you, Johannes.
And I think actually, Johannes, I think that deserves a strap. That was a very good question. So well done. We'll send you I'll send you an email which will explain to you how you get your simpler strap and Johannes Handila from Tampere, Finland. And
it's a good job you got in there with that last question there, Johannes, because that is the end of the show. Thank you very, very much for tuning in this week.
Sorry about my Brexit.
No, that's all right. It's okay, because I think we're all feeling this.
It makes me so angry.
I know. I can tell. It's not helping the gout, is it? To be honest,
no.
Thank you for the questions. Lifeblood of the show. We can't shovel coal into the firebox. I know you like that, unless you bring your questions to the party. So send them in via the website address. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Thank you to our guest, Ian MacDonald, this week, and big love to our friends at Simpler for letting us give away a camera strap each to our favourite email question of the week. Go to simpler.us, simpler.us. Music from Blue Wednesday. Payoffs, right? Well, here we go. We got some fancy new payoffs now, which are coming in. So, funnily enough, we had loads of people say they do them, and then we haven't.
Yeah.
We could still do with when you've said you do them. Now, actually send them to us.
Yeah,
it would be fantastic. But hopefully, this will start the ball rolling. Your one this week is from Jeremy Baker in Australia.
Neil's Instagram is Neil James. See his films on YouTube at Neil James Photo. His website is neiljames.com for pictures and one-to-one mentoring. I'm Tim Bender from Indiana. My Instagram is TimothyBme, TimothyBme, and my website is timothybme.com.
Now, I know I pressed the wrong button. We can either just do this all over again, or we just accept that I was a complete idiot and did that.
You know nothing about this stuff,
no,
do you?
I don't.
Nothing.
If I press the right button, we'll get the one that is your one. Who is? That was Tim Binder. This is Jeremy Baker from Australia for Kevin.
Kevin's Instagram is Kevin Mullins Photography. See his films on YouTube at Documentary Eye. His website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. All for street workshops and everything Fujifilm Fujifilm, go to f16.click. I'm Jeremy Baker, and my Instagram is jb102.
Okay, so if you want to send them in, it's as easy as just reading the script now is on that question thing. So if you look on the Facebook group, you find the question, or email us, I'll send you the script. You add in your own Instagram or your website plug as well. We're delighted for you to do that, and then we'll play them out on the show. And looking forward, if you're listening to this on Monday, the 9th of September, looking forward to seeing you if you're coming in Brighton tomorrow for the big meetup. We are meeting at 11 o'clock.
Yep.
At the entrance to the Palace Pier. Do not go to the one that's burned down.
No, I'll be the one that's limping.
You won't be limping by then. Oh, mind you, we probably have a few red wines the night before, won't we? So.